So welcome to this launch webinar for the International Nitrogen Network. My name's David Cantor, and on behalf of this new project and all the co-PIs and the staff working on it, thank you for joining us. I see many familiar names, but also some new names, which is very exciting. I'm a professor of environmental studies at New York University, NYU, and chair of the International Nitrogen Initiative. And we're excited to introduce this new project, the International Nitrogen Network, which is a project of the International Nitrogen Initiative. We're going to give you an overview of this project today and the motivation for it and the different components of it. And most importantly, how all of you can get involved, because ultimately this project, its success will depend on the amount of engagement and involvement from the nitrogen community in building bridges to areas of expertise and stakeholder groups that perhaps we've established connections with before, but are not as strong, or groups and fields that we have yet to build bridges to. So we're very excited to have you all here. Just to give you a sense of the agenda, and every single person involved in the core team of this project, so the 4 PIs and the administrative staff will be, the project staff will be presenting today, so you'll get introduced to all of them. And so I'll be giving an overview of the project. Then the other co-PIs of the project, Peter Groffman, Xin Zhang, William San Martin, will be giving an overview of the working groups. Margot Alfar, our data manager, will be presenting the data portal. Endon Thornton, our policy fellows manager, and many of you know as the operations manager for the International Nitrogen Initiative, will be presenting the policy fellows program. Our project manager, Carson Ross, will be presenting action items, and then we'll also have obviously a Q&A after this avalanche of information to take any questions, comments, suggestions. So thank you again for joining us. In a nutshell, this project, the International Nitrogen Network, or iN-Net, is a new I&I project that we hope will shape a policy-relevant and actionable research agenda to support halving nitrogen waste, and specifically to address some knowledge gaps that we in the entire nitrogen community has identified as important in terms of the development of effective national action plans and effective nitrogen policies at national and international levels. If you're on this call, this slide may well be redundant, but for completeness, I think it's important just that we set the table again in terms of why we're here, why nitrogen pollution is important. And as many of you know, humanity has a complicated relationship with nitrogen, perhaps the element we have the most complicated relationship with, in the sense that it is a fundamentally essential resource and nutrient to life itself, and at the same time, one of the major drivers of all our environmental problems, or at least the central environmental problems we face, right? So it fuels photosynthesis and life itself, and obviously through the Haber-Bosch process, we've been able to develop synthetic fertilizer to feed half the world. And yet, when nitrogen is lost to the environment, it exacerbates every major environmental problem, from air and water pollution to biodiversity loss, ozone depletion, and climate change. Now, nitrogen's profile in both the scientific and the policy world has been rising rapidly, again, very much thanks to the efforts of many people on this call. We've had resolutions from the UN Environment Assembly that have set the stage for action. We've had international agreements, including the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework that has a target around nutrient pollution, and the Colombo Declaration that was the first to commit a group of countries to halving nitrogen waste, that shows a global commitment to action. There have been several examples of national and regional action in terms of plans and strategies being put in place. And there's a growing number of scientific assessments. Just a couple of months ago, there was the Global Nitrous Oxide Assessment that was presented at COP29 and the International Ozone meetings. And then later this year, there will be the first International Nitrogen Assessment published by Cambridge University Press, which again, many of you have contributed to. And so this is all great. Nitrogen's profile has been rising, and we've all been making contributions to that. And yet there are still major knowledge gaps. And we could all, I'm sure if we brainstormed with just the people here today, we would come up with tens and tens of knowledge gaps. When we were developing this proposal and this project, we really focused in on three in particular, with a fourth one that cuts across all of them. The first being, and I should say that these knowledge gaps very much from the perspective of what is necessary in order to develop effective nitrogen policy, right? And with that in mind, if you're going to develop a national action plan or national policies and international policies, there's a lot of data now out there, but it's still incomplete and inconsistent across many parts of the world and many sectors. There's a lack of effective governance options. We have many governance options in place, but not many of them have been super effective at actually reducing nitrogen pollution. And as we continue to take action to deal with climate change and make efforts to decarbonize global economies, there are certain implications for nitrogen of those actions and those relationships that aren't as well understood. And across all of these three, there's incomplete communication also. And that is communicate in the broadest term, in the sense communication between disciplines, communications between stakeholders, communications to the policy world, communication to the general public. And so that's kind of a cross-cutting gap across all of these knowledge gaps. And so this new project, this International Nitrogen Network, is an opportunity to connect networks of experts around the world. The people on this call represent many different countries, many different areas of expertise, many different professional backgrounds. And so our hope with this project is to bring together researchers from not just the natural sciences, but also the humanities and the social sciences, and stakeholders from really across a broad spectrum of what you would define as stakeholders, from government, international organizations, civil society, farmer groups, private sector, to develop a research agenda and a new data portal that supports effective national action plans to halve nitrogen waste. So this project is funded by the National Science Foundation, the US National Science Foundation. It is still, as far as we know, funded by the National Science Foundation. It's under the program of the iN-Net, or Accelerating Networks of Networks program, which supports, as you can see, connecting research networks, as opposed to supporting fundamental research as the primary activity, right? So the goal of iN-Net is not to necessarily support the actual process of doing research, but rather creating environments and connections between researchers and experts that might not otherwise have connected before, to help shape the research agenda going forward and develop a data portal that will hopefully be helpful both to the research community and the broader stakeholder community. The primary focus of this broader program, the iN-Net program, is to link at least 3 networks to cooperate, to identify and coordinate efforts to address knowledge gaps and research needs. We have 9 research networks that are part of iN-Net. This program is not meant to create a whole new network or to scale up dissemination. It's really to connect folks and groups of experts that may have some connections already, but either aren't as strong as they could be, or perhaps not as connected to a whole broad swath of networks. And these projects, including ours, are for up to a period of 4 years and funded up to $1.5 million, which is what our budget is for this project. In terms of the logic model of this project, this is the broad overview of this project, and then we'll get into the details of each of these. As I said, the co-PIs will talk through the working groups, and then you'll hear also about the data portal and the policy fellows. The ultimate goal is hopefully to spark new research and a research agenda that can help contribute towards halving nitrogen waste. Obviously, that's a very broad and grand goal, and we hope to make some small contribution to that through these activities. And the 3 major activities that are the pillars of the iN-Net project are 3 working groups on these major knowledge gaps of data, governance, and climate. Bringing together existing data, already published and publicly available data, in a way that is visually compelling and organized in a way that's hopefully helpful to both researchers and countries developing national action plans, and also several opportunities for early career researchers to become involved in this work. The outputs hopefully are an innovative and policy relevant research agenda, an open access data platform, and then also setting the stage for this a policy relevant actionable research agenda through obviously papers, new grant proposals, and public outreach through policy briefs, webinars, and other forms of outreach. And ultimately, we hope that this leads to research that is more aligned with policy goals. That one thing that's very important to us in this project is that non-academic stakeholders are involved in the shaping of the research agendas and data portal from the beginning. So there's knowledge co-production that we hope to push forward and train a new generation of nitrogen scientists and professionals, and obviously to strengthen relationships between the different partner networks that are part of this project. Here we all are. As part of it, you'll hear from every one of us here, including me, obviously, talking about different aspects of the project. In terms of the partner networks, there are many ways we could have drawn this figure to represent the relationships between these different networks. This is more just to illustrate how intimately connected already a lot of these relationships are, and we hope to build on them. Many of you know these acronyms of different groups, whether it be the iN-Net, the International Nitrogen Management System, or the South Asian Nitrogen Hub, the Global Partnership on Nutrient Management, GPNM, the Task Force on Reactive Nitrogen. All work on particular aspects of the nitrogen challenge, work in specific regions, and all have some connection in some way, either explicit or implicit, direct or indirect, to the International Nitrogen Initiative. And so this project is trying to, in a more kind of formal setting, bring those networks together through these activities. In terms of the timeline of iN-Net, just for this first year, as I said, it's a 4-year project, and we can say that it's officially launching now. We obviously got funded last year, but for all intents and purposes, the project starts now, right at this moment. And so we have this launch webinar. As Carson Ross, our project manager, will be describing, there will be applications for to be part of these working groups. That deadline will be in a month. It's a relatively straightforward application process. There is also then will be a separate application for policy fellows that Ed and Thornton will be talking about. And we hope to get these working groups started quite quickly, meeting regularly, first in April, May, and then sometime in the early summer, and then finally in the early autumn before our first annual iN-Net workshop. So there will be 4 of these workshops over the course of the project, where we'll all meet to discuss progress, to work together on specific projects or proposals. And we are currently planning for the first iN-Net workshop to be held in Nairobi on the sidelines of the next UNEA, the UN Environment Assembly meeting. The one after, we're hoping to be able to connect these workshops to bigger meetings within the nitrogen community so that we can harness already the participation and the energy that will be going on in those meetings. So there's UNEA. Next year is the next I&I conference, which will be in Kyoto, Japan in November. So we hope to have an iN-Net workshop there. And then we'll see, obviously, in the years after that, where makes most sense. I'll give a brief introduction to the working groups, but then I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues who are going to be much more eloquent and precise in their descriptions of these working groups. But essentially, the goal of these working groups is to try and co-develop policy relevant and actionable research agendas on these specific knowledge gaps, right? So these are groups that are focused on building research agendas to address these knowledge gaps that are hopefully necessary then to develop effective national action plans. And in terms of how we think about the composition of those working groups, obviously researchers, but again, hopefully from across not just the natural sciences, but also social sciences and humanities, and then stakeholders, again, across a broad spectrum from governments to NGOs to farmer organizations, private sector, international organizations. And in terms of what that will look like in terms of the process, right, we expect regular meetings, probably at least once a quarter, to develop synthesis, review, meta-analysis, perspective papers, and grant proposals and other public-facing outputs. And so I'm now going to pass over, I believe, first to Peter Groffman, who'll talk about the data working group and provide a bit more detail there, and then to Xinjiang to talk about climate, William San Martin to talk about governance, William will also be talking about the Research Fellows Program, where young scientists will be connected into each of these working groups. So, Peter, the floor is yours.
Okay, so we have a data and indicators work group, and the objective of this group is to transform or at least significantly improve access to nitrogen data and diverse types of nitrogen data, with a particular focus on the development of national action plans for nitrogen. We're excited about national action plans, and if you think about creating a nitrogen profile or a national action plan for a different country, we have to say, well, what data do we have that we need? Is this data available? Where can we find it? We would like to significantly improve the availability of the data that people would need to make national action plans for nitrogen. Lots of different kinds of data. Certainly agricultural data on fertilizers and crops, data on environmental effects of nitrogen, and then policy and regulation data. So these are very, very different types of data. We also need to recognize that different countries are going to have different nitrogen action plans based somewhat on the availability of data. So some countries have very detailed data on fertilizers and crops and environmental effects and policies and regulations, and others much less. But a unifying theme in all these plans is we want data that's going to drive us to action. And this requires some thought. So in many cases, more data are not necessarily what we need. What we need are better data, or data that are particularly useful for driving action. And so that's going to be a big theme with our group. And then beyond national action plans, we're hoping to create this data platform, which again will transform or significantly improve publicly available data related to nitrogen for national action plans, and then other things that people are interested in. We can move to the next slide. So we've got these three, we go back one more. Yeah, so we've got these three focus areas are, okay, what data availability, and again, very diverse nitrogen relevant sectors. We want data that is actionable. So we really want to translate data into actionable policy measures, and that's going to require some thought. And then the natural outgrowth of this will be the development of data gaps. So as we go through this process, we're going to clearly identify needs for future nitrogen data collection and analysis. So those are our focus areas. What data do we have? What actionable data do we have? And what are the gaps that we need to fill? Right, the next slide. So in all these working groups, we need you. We need people, and we're just delighted to have a nice turnout for this webinar this morning, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you're sitting. And we need lots of participants for these working groups. So for this data group, we need data nerds like me, people who've been collecting nitrogen data for decades. But it's biophysical data like soils and water and gas data that we collect, but then also social science data. So again, we're very interested in a bottom-up participatory approach, and so we need people both on the biophysical side and also on the social science side. We really need people that are interested in thinking about the links from data to action. And so we're hoping to get people who are really interested in thinking creatively about what kind of data is most compelling for stimulating change and action plans. And we need representatives from all across the world and from all different types of sectors. So we need community groups, and we need scientists, and we need decision makers. And again, we're interested in national action plans for countries across the world. So we're hoping to get a very wide range of participants from multiple regions and multiple sectors. And I hope you'll join us.
Thank you, Peter. All right, next up is Xin.
Yes, thank you, David. Good morning. I'm Xin Zhang, professor at the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, and also the director for the Global Nitrogen Innovation Center for Clean Energy and Environment, or we call it NICE. So over the past 3 years, I really found myself kind of navigating between two contrasting realities concerning nitrogen. So in one reality, we're grappling with the too much nitrogen problem, the excess nitrogen loss to the environment posing significant risk to human health and our ecosystems. So this has led to the urgent call for half the nitrogen waste by 2030. But meanwhile, on the other hand, in the other reality, there's a growing excitement of the potential of using renewable-based ammonia to replace the marine shipping fuel, aiming to decarbonize the shipping sector. So this would require more than tripling the current ammonia production. In fact, a report has also just suggested that the possibility of increasing the ammonia production by 6 times by 2050. So as someone living in a eutrophic world and worry about having too much nitrogen, one would be deeply concerned about the implications of this surge in ammonia demand. And it could profoundly impact the nitrogen cycle, affect fertilizer price, and threaten food security. So there's a lot of unknown there for us to explore. Next slide. So if you think this decarbonization option is still a wild card, you might be aware of several other existing decarbonization strategies that are closely linked to the nitrogen use in agricultural production. As you can see in the middle is a simple illustration of the nitrogen input and output of the cropping system. And the decarbonization efforts can influence those nitrogen flows in many different ways. Some decarbonization efforts depicted in the green color could reduce the nitrogen usage, but others shown in the red color box, like ammonia fuel and biofuel, may require more nitrogen adding to the environment. And then there are also several decarbonization efforts with uncertain outcomes, such as fixing soil carbons or land mitigating the land cover change. So the impact of those decarbonization efforts on nitrogen use will be further compounded by the ongoing climate change and some adaptation strategies. Therefore, it is clear that there's a critical need to bridge those two worlds. The one world focused on nitrogen management and the other world focused on the climate change actions. Next. So therefore, the overall goal for our nitrogen and climate working group is mainly threefold. First, to bridge the nitrogen management community and the climate action community through better communication and elevate the awareness of nitrogen challenges in the context of climate mitigation and adaptation. And second goal is to coordinate and stimulate the research on the interplay between the nitrogen and climate actions. And the last but not least, we're trying to minimize the trade-off and maximize the synergy between the National Action Plan for Nitrogen and the nationally determined contributions that's NDC for countries. Specifically, we will start with addressing the following critical questions, such as what are the impacts of the major climate mitigation efforts on nitrogen use and its environmental outcomes? And what are the impact of major climate adaptation efforts on nitrogen use and environmental outcomes? And then how to integrate the nitrogen and carbon connections into the scientific and policy efforts to address the climate change without impeding the effectiveness of climate and nitrogen actions. So of course, as a working group, we will collectively adjust and prioritize the focus area based on our discussion throughout the year. If you think there are other critical questions need to be included in this list, please feel free to reach out to me and we can get this list more complete. And then for the working group, we are aiming to have the representation from a variety of sectors and all major regions of the world. Then the individuals with experience in any of those areas that's listed on the slides will be very much in need. But we also acknowledge that this is not the may not encompass all the expertise that can contribute to our goals. So if you are passionate about the nitrogen management and climate action and believe your background could provide a unique contribution to this working group, please do not hesitate to reach out or to apply. And your enthusiasm and knowledge are what we need the most. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shin. And William San Martin is going to talk to us about the governance working group.
Thank you, David. Yes, we're going to talk about the third working group, which is focused on global nitrogen governance. As David said at the beginning, we live in a context where the international community lacks effective governance options to address the multiple sources and impacts of nitrogen. We can say that this is partly due to disciplinary and institutional divisions that tend to fragment research on governance across regions and scales from the international level to the subnational, but also across emission sources and mediums in which impacts are documented, right? This lack of effective options is also probably a consequence of the still limited yet growing integration of nitrogen into other governance frameworks, such as climate change, biodiversity, or public health. The working group on governance that I'll be leading will aim to address some of these knowledge gaps, as well as to identify socio-political and economic barriers and policy strategies to address nitrogen's impacts on humans and ecosystems. All of this with the overall goal to establish and advance new research agendas, as David mentioned at the beginning, that can support specific policy outcomes, which connects to our second goal there. And maybe we can go to the previous one, David, please. We'll aim to translate this research into practical outputs to support UN member states and research communities to advance sustainable nitrogen strategies. And our third goal is to recognize and address how disparities in research capacities, political cultures, or policy priorities between the global north and south can impact negotiations, agreements, or new strategies. Here, and before we move into the next slide, I would like to add that the working group would embrace a notion of governance that builds, of course, on the trajectories developed by fields like political science, international relations, and public policy, but that integrates other areas and methodologies from environmental humanities and social sciences about how we study and practice the governance of environmental pollution and conflict, acknowledging that questions about scales, legitimacy, and democracy are critical in this process. In doing so, I think we try to build a flexible working definition of governance that can allow us to really think critically about the plural nature of nitrogen governance, from the challenges coming from the biochemical process of the nitrogen cycle in itself to the more cultural aspects of technology and policy making. The next slide, please, David. There are three initial areas of focus that I hope we can grow as the working group is established. The first one is to understand and evaluate how current governance approaches tend to prioritize the efficiency of existing production systems, which tend to be slow or only with an incremental change, and to identify how alternative and perhaps more transformative approaches can address more structural issues that in turn can accelerate change. The second explores the implications of recent economic shocks and social resistance to nitrogen policies. We believe that addressing these issues will require a better understanding of how political, economic, and sociocultural factors interact to shape nitrogen governance at local or international scales. And our third focus invites us to think beyond farmers and consumers to the broader structural constraints that shape individual behavior by broadening the view to include agrochemical companies, agricultural extension services, for instance, or financial institutions. Although we have defined these as primary focus areas, we understand them as a set of lenses through which to view nitrogen issues rather than fixed topics. There is still great flexibility depending on the expertise of the working group members to redefine these areas and set some priorities based on their interest and knowledge. So there is some flexibility there to discuss. Next slide, please. Now we'd like to invite everyone in the audience and others in your networks that you think might be interested and a good fit for this working group. We're looking for good representation across disciplines, sectors, and regions of the world. And we're particularly interested in scholars and practitioners with social science and humanities backgrounds who have actively engaged in environmental issues, or the other way around, people with natural science backgrounds who have engaged in social and policy dimensions. So the invitation and application process is open, and please contact me Peter or Chin, if you have any questions about any of these working groups. The next slide, please. And before we talk more about other aspects of the project, I would like to point out that each of these 3 working groups that you just heard about will be working with a research fellow who will be working closely with the working group leader to co-lead groups discussions, priorities, and outputs. This is a very good opportunity for early career researchers, broadly defined, to contribute to some of the major outputs of the working groups, including publications, policy briefs, or grant proposals. The position lasts 1 year and includes a modest honorarium of $1,000. So applications are now open for the first 3 research fellow positions on our website. So please take a look, share it with anyone who you think may be a good fit and interested in being part of this. And with that, I'll turn it over to Margot, who will talk a little bit more about our data portal. So thank you.
Thank you, William, and hi, everyone. David, yeah, great. Next slide is fine. As David mentioned earlier, so there is a wealth of nitrogen data available, but it's often scattered across different sources and platforms, which makes it difficult to use and access effectively. And so this is why, to address this challenge, we are building a publicly accessible data portal to support national nitrogen action plans. And so this portal will serve as a centralized hub that we hope will simplify discovery and usability of nitrogen data. And to do so, we are bringing together existing publicly available data from sources such as the World Bank, the FAO, OECD, EPA, and others. And so this includes both quantitative data, such as nitrous oxide and ammonia emissions, but also qualitative information on existing nitrogen-related policies and regulations. And in addition to aggregating that data, we also want to visualize it with maps, graphs, and other interactive tools to make the data more compelling and readable for users. And so we envision this data portal as a baseline assessment tool to help countries develop their nitrogen profiles. So let's say you are a policymaker looking to draft a national action plan for your country. With this platform, you could assess nitrogen pollution levels, so how much nitrogen is being produced, consumed, and lost in the environment, determine which sectors contribute the most to that pollution. So is it agriculture, industry, transport? But you could also review whether there are existing nitrogen policies in your country, and if not, or if there are gaps, explore successful policies from other countries that could serve as a model for your national action plan. And so this resource is intended to serve policymakers, but also researchers, stakeholders, and civil society at large, essentially anyone invested in improving nitrogen management at the national level. And so ultimately, our goal is to provide as complete a picture as possible of a country's nitrogen profile given available data. We, for this platform, you are not generating new data sets, but rather consolidating what already exists into a single comprehensive platform. And so this effort will complement the work of the data working group, which Peter talked about earlier, by helping to identify research gaps and areas that the working group will be able to work on. And so we've already compiled a quite comprehensive list of data sets and databases that will serve as the foundation for this platform. And since this is a collaborative effort, we will be sharing that list with you, and we would greatly appreciate any feedback and contributions. As I said, we are looking specifically for data that can help shape national action plans, so regional and national level information. We're not looking for local or field level data sets. And so we've created a Google form to collect this additional information. And so if you go through the list and notice any open source databases, data sets, policies, regulations that we have not listed but could help build a national action plan, you can submit that information through the form so we can add it to the list. But all of that information will be provided in the spreadsheet, which Carson will be sharing at the end of this presentation. Thank you. And I think this is Eden's turn.
Thank you so much, Margot. And you know, just before turning it over to Eden, I do want to mention too, first, thank you all for putting your introductions in the chat. It's exciting to see so many, from Ethiopia to Ivory Coast to Pakistan to France, all represented here. So that's very exciting for us to see you all here. Thank you for indulging us in letting us know where you're coming from. It's very exciting. And just to give a little preview to what Eden is going to talk about, one of the unique aspects of this project, and I think one of the reasons that NSF was excited about this project, is that the networks that are part of this are not purely scientific networks, or at least some of them are not purely scientific networks. There are also networks that are intimately engaged or explicitly engaged in the policy process. And that's what makes this network of networks slightly different from other projects that NSF has funded. And hence why we felt it was important to also create this Policy Fellows program to kind of, again, this is all about hopefully building stronger connections between both scientific disciplines and fields, but also between the science world and the policy world. And so Eden is going to talk more about that process. So Eden, take it away.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for that intro, David. We think that the iN-Net Policy Fellows Program is a unique opportunity for early career professionals to gain direct experience in science policy translation within the international nitrogen governance networks. And so as David just said, it's not a typical research fellowship, it's a policy placement, which is designed to embed our emerging leaders within key global initiatives working on nitrogen management. So next slide, please. Each year, one of our policy fellows will be placed within one of the 3 international policy hosts, which will include the Task Force on Reactive Nitrogen, who develop global nitrogen policy recommendations, the Global Partnership for Nutrient Management, which many of us know here, working on sustainable nitrogen management as well. And we will also look forward to hosting a fellow at the UNEP Nitrogen Working Group, supporting the UN's Nitrogen Working Group and governance frameworks. So a policy fellow ultimately will be assigned to co-create a host-specific policy recommendation, which could be anything from a policy brief or a governance recommendation, which influence those national action plans and strategies, to contributing to a nitrogen action plan or regulatory framework within the host organization. So we're excited for the opportunities for the fellows to engage within their networks and actively shape nitrogen policy by working on the science policy interface. It's also an opportunity for mentorship and funding and global exposure and hands-on experience. So next slide, please, David. So we are looking for early career professionals who are passionate about science work. Our ideal candidates will be PhD students, postdocs, and junior policy researchers. And as with the research fellows, these fellows will have the opportunity to attend the iN-Net annual workshop as well as an honorarium to recognize their work. So we are looking for action-oriented professionals interested in nitrogen policy and the science policy interface. The applications will be opening soon, and we look forward to everyone's interest. So the main goal of the Policy Fellows program will be to make this urgent science and policy need more accessible, and also help implement science and policy more effectively alongside one another. So thank you for the time, and we're looking forward to welcoming our first cohort of Policy Fellows, and Carson will give any additional information about how to keep in touch with us.
Thanks so much, Eden. And to finish us with a bang here, we want to emphasize, we're going to have Carson Ross, our project manager, emphasize all the various action items and things that you can do to get involved, and we really strongly encourage you to do so. So Carson, please.
Okay, thanks, David. Hi, everyone. I am the project manager. My name is Carson, and yeah, I'll just close out the presentation with a few ways that you can get involved right away with the iN-Net project and stay in touch. So you can go to the next slide. So the main thing that we're doing right now is actively recruiting for the working groups. The 3 working groups, data, governance, and nitrogen and climate, all have open calls for applicants right now. You can find them on our website, or you can scan these QR codes. The top code will take you to more information on the website, which includes general information about the working groups, but also we have detailed calls for each working group to describe the role and the sort of profile of applicant that we're looking for. You can also scan the bottom QR code there that will take you directly to the application form. The application is a Google form. It's quite straightforward. We ask some kind of basic personal information, and then we ask that you submit a CV and a cover letter, which is the bulk of the application, but it's just a 1-page cover letter. It should include sort of why you're interested in the project, how can you contribute to the working group, how would participation in the working group contribute to your research, and all of this, of course, is outlined in detail in the Google form. And I should point out that it's the same application for general participation in the working group or to participate as a research fellow. So in the application, you can really just check a box that says you want to be a research fellow, and we ask that you discuss that explicitly in your cover letter. So the applications are due a month from now. February 28th is currently the deadline, and we hope to have a pretty quick turnaround, probably get back to you by the end of March. And as David showed in the beginning, the first year timeline for the project, that we aim to have our first working group meetings sometime in April. So that's sort of the timeline for working group applications. So there's a few other ways you can get involved, David, if you'll go to the next slide. The policy fellowship applications are not open yet. We're going to stagger them, so they should open around the time that the working group applications close. So we're aiming for probably end of February, beginning of March, but we will blast all of that information out as soon as it's available. So you want to stay in touch by signing up for our mailing list. So you can do that by scanning the QR code at the bottom and visit our website. We'll always be updating that with applications and any updates. And you can also reach out to us, the admin@iN-Net.network email address. I monitor that inbox, so there's always a real person responding. And I can also, put you in touch with other people in the project. We will hopefully be launching some social media in the next month or so. We are going to have a LinkedIn page, X and Blue Sky profiles coming soon. So all of that will be posted to the website and blasted out in our newsletter. So be sure to stay in touch. And then the last thing that I want to mention, actually, will you go back, David? Thanks. The last thing is this data aggregation spreadsheet that Margot mentioned. So we are actively collecting feedback for this list of data. This the database sort of aggregation that Margot has already started. It's quite comprehensive, but we're always we are looking to add to it. So if you're interested in that, you can scan the final QR code. And I'm going to put all of these links in the chat as well, if that's easier. So those are the ways you can stay in touch. You can reach out, and we're looking forward to your applications and your feedback. So that actually will, conclude our presentation portion of this webinar. And we're now going to open it up to questions. So you can use the Q&A function to ask questions, and we have still about 45 minutes left. So hopefully we can get to everyone's questions. It looks like there's already a few in the chat. And David, unless you have any last comments, I can just kind of start going through the Q&A box.
No, I think that's great. Hopefully this, obviously this has been a bit of a whirlwind tour through iN-Net. There's more information on everything that we've talked about on our website. And so, any questions or feedback, suggestions, comments, this is really the beginning of this. And obviously, this project is also standing on the shoulders of giants that have come before it. And, you know, we're trying to move things forward in a small way to help make progress on this topic that I think all of us care about. So Carson, please.
Okay, great. Well, let's see. It looks like some of the questions have already been answered, but I'm going to start at the beginning here. I have a question from Rabab Alawi. Two questions actually. Asked about joining the working group. So I believe that question was answered, the working group application process. I posted the links in the chat as well. But the second question is if we're collaborating with the UNEP nitrogen working group. Hopefully that's also already been answered now because we are already collaborating with them. They're going to be one of our partners who will be working with the policy fellows as well. So they're a very close partner. So I'm just going to move on to the next question from Mohammed Riaz. It says, oh, not a question, that's a comment. All right, the next question is for Margot. From Bernard, it says, will the new data portal be granular enough to support private sector implementation in value chains, i.e. field level data?
No, like I mentioned, we're only aggregating data at the national and regional level. So we're not gathering data that is local or field level, at least not for now. So yeah.
Great, thanks, Margot. Next question is also for Margot, although maybe David will have some input on this. It says, how do you envision the data portal will be supported after the 4 years of the iN-Net project?
I think, David, you might want to answer this one.
That's a great question. The short answer is, I think there are multiple options in the sense that this project, the iN-Net, may well continue after the 4 years if there's additional funding to support it, or there may well be a new nitrogen project that we can't envision that takes it over. We could also imagine one or more of the partner networks becoming the host for such a data portal. So I think there are several options. Our focus right now is really to build it and hopefully make it a useful resource. And I would genuinely consider it a success if someone in 4 years is saying, how can we keep this alive? That we want to get to that sentiment first, and then once we're there, then, you know, but we already are thinking about how we might sustain this in the long term. And I should also just say, you know, I'm fully aware, having attended these kind of webinars before, that when you hear a project talking about building yet another data portal, you know, that somewhere in your body, your heart or stomach or other parts of your body may just sink. And I totally understand that. And that's why, you know, it was very clear for us when we're developing this. Again, we're not trying in any way to step on the toes of other really important efforts in terms of data collection and generation and aggregation, right? We see this very much with a specific focus towards that there are lots of amazing data sources that exist already that are kind of spread all over the place amongst multiple sources. And you can see that on the spreadsheet that Margot's already put together. And so the hope is that by aggregating this and visualizing these data sources in a compelling way, that we can create these kind of complete pictures, these nitrogen profiles for countries that we don't feel have necessarily been presented in as comprehensive a way before.
Thanks, David. We'll go on to the next question. It says, what will be the link between the work of the EM-EP TFRN nitrogen budget? And I think maybe that is a question for, yeah, maybe David or even Eden.
Well, in terms of the, yes, so I mean, as TFRN is going to be one of the partner networks of this, and I think understanding or again connecting with what the work of that nitrogen budget expert panel does and how it feeds into this will be an important primary discussion point in the data group, potentially in the governance group. Again, really the understanding first is to bring all these networks together to understand the full lay of the land. And then we hope to be more precise in exactly how those relationships will manifest. So I can't really provide more detail than that right now, but hopefully that addresses some of it. I don't know if Peter or others want to jump on that, or Eden.
I just wanted to, I appreciate the opportunity to circle back to TFRN also, because I just wanted to make sure that we'd outlined the scope of that organization's work as well. So it's, as David mentioned, connected to the European Monitoring and Evaluation Program, or that EMAP that we just talked about. And so it's a transboundary air pollution network, which is unique amongst our policy networks as well. So I hope that'll be its own unique opportunity.
Great, thank you, Eden. Similar, or I guess, yeah, kind of a linked question. Is this initiative linked to the Global Research Alliance? David?
Yeah, I'm excited to connect with them. So the other thing to note, we obviously have these networks, listed as our partner networks now. This is very much kind of should be seen as a living network of networks, in the sense that there is, we would be excited to add new partners to this group. And so there isn't an explicit link yet with this Global Research Alliance. It's almost inevitable when you're building these networks of networks that you don't have complete coverage to start with, but the idea is hopefully that we start and strengthen. And so if you have connections with other research networks that you think would be really good to connect with, we'd love for those connections to be made.
Great. Next question. Peter Lennar is, I think, asking the question on everyone, at least US-based, mind. Is NSF funding at risk with the new US administration? I can sort of start to answer that. I think that the question is on everyone's mind, and there's a lot of sort of a lack of clarity right now in terms of what's going to happen, but I can say that we're monitoring it very closely. As of now, our funding, at least for the next year, is absolutely secure. So we're going to continue with our project activities as planned for the next year, and continue to monitor if there's any changes. But other than that, I don't think that we have any information that you don't have. But maybe David, if you want to add anything there, or anyone else.
No, I think you covered it. We have, as Carson mentioned, we know that we have the funds for the coming year, the first year of the project, and beyond that, we shall see. It really is up in the air and day to day, and obviously quite confusing. And we are operating now under the assumption that this project will continue until we know different.
Great. And from Rabev Alaoui, we have just as a request that we will be working in the North African region, where there's lots of data gaps and limited research. I can say that we are dedicated to working globally and have a focus on the global South, and definitely have partners who are working in Africa, but I don't know if anyone specifically has comments on ideas of how we'll be working in North Africa specifically and wants to add to that.
Yeah, just to add a quick note that through the iN-Net International National Initiative has a broad spatial geographic coverage. Meanwhile, the NICE, the Global Natural Innovation Center, also have our partners at the based in Morocco, but also have the extensive network in the North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa region. So yeah, so we are certainly going to try our best to understand and try to address some of the data gaps there, if that helps.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, I'll go to the next question. Is it the top priority agenda of this network to develop working groups to apply for climate funds? It should not be included, especially including the partners majorly from developing countries. I'm not sure who to direct this question to. Maybe David.
I'm just reading the question again, just so I get it properly. I'm not sure exactly what is meant by climate funds. I think just more generally, the idea is hopefully to connect experts, both from academia and outside of academia, that haven't made those connections before, and hopefully that allows for and opens up funding opportunities or grant opportunities that might not otherwise have existed. Because nitrogen cuts across every major environmental problem, or many of them, not all of them, but many of them, you could definitely imagine being able to tap into climate-focused funds, amongst others. But I wouldn't be able to say more than that right now, and I don't want to be too prescriptive because I can imagine things arising in working group discussions and initiatives that we couldn't have possibly foreseen.
Great, thank you. I will direct this to Peter and maybe Margot. Are you targeting to include both observational and model simulated data?
Yeah.
Or Margot, yeah.
Both right now in the spreadsheet that we have, it's mostly observational, but there's one source that is projecting, I think it's nitrous oxide emission, or the different type of nitrogen emissions up to the 2050 and 2100 threshold. So I think both could be useful.
And it's interesting, we have a bunch of questions in the chat about the scale of data or reconciling data to allow for comparisons. And we are not planning to do quite a bit of that, to do much of that. We mostly are aggregating and making available existing data sources. But so this whole question of derived data products, which all these questions about scale and reconciliation bring up, is a good question that the data and indicators group is going to have to explore. Certainly, our initial goal is to say, okay, what data are out there? What are the strengths and weaknesses of those different data sources? And then the group's going to get together. And if we can make a case that, boy, if we could aggregate this particular data set in a way that facilitated comparisons among regions within or between countries as something that would facilitate using data to facilitate action, then we would do it. So the question of derived data products is I think one of the things we hope to explore in this data group.
Thanks. Okay, next question is really quick. How many policy fellows will there be over the project timeline? I'll just answer that briefly. We're going to have 3 per year is our goal. So a total of 12, up to 12 over the course of the project. And I'll move on to Penny Johns. Says, I noticed in the initial briefing that your diagram focused on inorganic nitrogen, which is different from the approach in the UK, where policy is shifting to nitrogen that includes organic fractions, which is important to livestock farming. Are you going with inorganic nitrogen or all nitrogen?
I wish we could say we were being so precise. The choice of figure is as much aesthetics than anything else. As many of you know, it's sometimes challenging to find the most compelling visualization of the nitrogen cycle. And so this was one of the more recent ones that I felt was good. But the short answer is yes, everything is on the table. So that's inorganic and nitrogen and organic nitrogen, including, livestock sources of nitrogen. There is no reason right now for us to constrain ourselves in that way. So all of the above.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta respond to that. Of course, we're dealing with there's a lot of manure out there, so it's kind of an oversight in the way we presented it. Definitely, organic nitrogen is part of the problem.
Thanks. Okay, the next question is from Thomas Nixon. What interaction between the working groups do you anticipate or will be facilitated beyond the annual meeting? It seems there are a lot of interesting overlaps and interlinkages. So I think either David or maybe William, if you want to jump in, since we haven't had any responses from you yet.
Yeah, I can jump in. David has been talking too much, so I think So yeah, very important question, something that we didn't cover in the presentation, but we do expect a lot of collaboration and kind of coordination across the working groups. And there are a couple of ways how we envision that happening. One, of course, is like the co-PIs leading each of those working groups, right? We're going to be able to hopefully have some good conversations about the research agendas, the outputs that are coming out from there, and how can we kind of work on some synergies that are start appearing there, right? But also I think the research fellows are going to be working closely with us, right? And if we imagine them as a kind of cohort, right? A group of very small group of people working on these three working groups and kind of coordinating, maybe collaborating with each other, I think is a very good way to make sure that those conversations discussions and especially the outputs from each of the working groups are talking to each other. And because as you said, Thomas, yeah, they are very connected, and I think there are going to be very interesting overlaps there that we want to take advantage of. So definitely. Thank you for your question.
Great, thanks, William. Okay, the next question I'm going to go to Carol Dallin. Is the working group application different from the early career research fellowship application? So I can just answer that really quickly. It's one application. If you scroll down through the form, there are some questions about how many years of experience do you have, to give us an idea of if you're sort of considered an early career researcher, and then an explicit just checkbox, are you interested in a research fellowship? And then beyond that, if you are interested in a research fellowship, we would just ask that you talk about that in your cover letter. But it's one form. Thanks for the question to clarify. And another question about the NSF funding. So it's all very new information, so we're just gonna kind of monitor and update our plans accordingly. But no, I would say it's too new to have an explicit contingency plan at the moment. But we have for sure 1 year of funding, and we're gonna continue business as usual in the meantime. And I'm going to just continue. We have a question about the research fellowship. Is it exclusively for PhD postdocs and assistant professors? What about specialists in nitrogen working elsewhere who want a career at the policy research interface, like NGOs? I don't know if maybe William or David, you want to answer this question about who we're looking for the research fellowships.
I can jump in and Edin, feel free to interrupt me. So I think it's important to separate the research fellows from the policy fellows, right? There are two different programs that are going to be probably in communication when we have both cohorts operating at the same time. But the policy fellows in particular are very oriented to working on a policy environment, right? Working with policy-oriented organizations and partners that are part of the project, right? The research fellows are going to be working with the working groups, right? Also thinking about science policy interface, but in working with other working groups members and with one of the co-PIs in the project to advance some of the research agendas, right? So in that way, it can be more scholarly focused if you wanted to see it like that, more than the policy fellows, but in both cases, it's a lot of science policy interface. I think in both cases, we are thinking about, of course, PhD students and early career scholars, but also people that are working outside of academia as well. So I would say the application process is welcome for everyone for both programs. And we understand that what the experience of being a research fellow or a policy fellow might mean different things for your career vision and a career path. So like, please make sure when you are submitting your application and your cover letter, highlight how the experience and being part of these networks can help your career as well, so we can get a better understanding of how this is providing something to you. I don't know, Erin, if you want to add something.
Great. I think that was pretty comprehensive. And just to add one last thing, which is that the application that's open right now is not for policy fellows. In case there's any lack of clarity there, the research fellow and the working group application is a single application. Policy fellows will open a month or so from now.
And I guess just one quick addition, sorry, is just that the policy fellows will be open to early career professionals as well, and will consider potentially, as somebody mentioned in the chat, some other non-traditional stakeholder groups, meaning not only postdoc researchers, right? So please feel free to apply if you're interested.
Thanks, Eden. Okay, the next question from Hongjun Wang is, will this program consider collaborating with industries? We can provide unique, actionable technology to reduce N2O emissions and enhance nitrogen use efficiency in agriculture. The very short answer is yes, absolutely. But if anyone wants to elaborate on that, please jump in.
No, I think you're totally right, Carson. You know, one of the kind of hopefully hallmarks of this project is that we really do want to engage in knowledge and research agenda co-production, co-producing and shaping the kind of this actionable research agenda with stakeholders that are directly implicated, and that includes the private sector. And so, you know, we envision all stakeholders being able to be involved in every element of the project, and also being able to come to the annual workshops. So yes, we strongly encourage that involvement.
If I may, I think also the strength of the policy goal of having nitrogen waste is very important to focus on here, right? Because we recognize that nitrogen management and sustainable nitrogen management is the basis for food security, water quality, air quality, local pollution, as well as it relates to climate, right? So we think that this would be a fabulous place to create that collaborative space with industry and other sources, but it's a very unique opportunity, most certainly.
Thanks, Eden. Okay, the next question from Dongyal Kim. I think there is a great lack of data and understanding about nitrogen dynamics and management in the global south. Limitations and constraints are one of the major obstacles for global sustainable nitrogen management. Do you have ideas on how this network can help resolve these issues? It's bringing up a great point, which is a huge focus of our work. But if maybe Peter, do you want to take that question?
First, I was going to say hi, Don Gill. I haven't seen you in a long time. It's great to hear from you. And yeah, I just agree with Carson. We recognize this; it's super important, and that's part of this why we're so gratified to see so many people on this call this morning. And we're definitely hoping and strongly encouraging applications from the global south.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to move to Carl Richards is pointing out that there is a database for N2O emissions from manure and fertilizer, and so not to duplicate the efforts, which we appreciate, and we definitely don't want to duplicate efforts. And I just want to reiterate that our portal is really trying to just aggregate data from all these different sources in one place, so it's easily accessible. Peter, you look like you want to jump in.
Yeah, so one of the things is duplication of data. So as Margot started to assemble these databases, there's a lot of duplicate databases. There's a lot of databases that present the same data. And so we've got a list of them. And one of the things we want the group to go through is to maybe make this a curated database, to say, okay, here are 3 databases that present the same information. And here are the strengths and weaknesses of those different databases. You might want to use this for this purpose. You might want to use this for this purpose. And so yes, there's already a lot of duplicate databases. I think if we could do some curation of those databases, it might be helpful for people who are trying to make these national action plans or do other assessment activities.
Thanks, Shin. You can add on to that.
Yeah, I think I just want to add quickly that yes, so the data working group are having this goal for collecting the data for the national action plan, so that there's a specific goal for kind of curating the data sets and soliciting the existing data to support that action. I hope that helped.
And I would also say,
absolutely,
yeah, I mean, we've thought a lot about this and kind of how the relationship between the data portal that we're developing and the data working group. And so the data working group will play this curator role, but also will be more forward-looking as well, right? The data portal is really thinking about what are the existing sources of data that are out there that could help enable more effective national action plans. And the data working group will help with that, but also based on what we're able to collect as part of this data portal, think, okay, looking forward now, and already, we have some hunches and shared with many of you, the Global South in many areas have huge data gaps. And so how can we build coalitions of researchers and stakeholders and governments to try and help bridge and fill in some of those data gaps, right? And be more perhaps specific in targeting what kinds of data could be collected and is most important to prioritize when developing national action plans. So that working group will be helping aggregate, but also looking forward as to say, given what we know, where do we need to focus our efforts?
Great. So it looks like we have about 5 or 6 questions left and just over 15 minutes. I hope we can get to them all. And if not, I apologize. And please feel free to reach out and stay in touch, and we'll keep the conversation going after. But just to move on quickly, next question is from Moril. It will be important to collect data for decision making. How can you help a country like Benin mapping nitrogen emissions in the agriculture sector? So I don't know if David wants to answer this. Yeah.
I mean, so we have some of the leading, our partner networks include INSA, the Integrated Nitrogen Studies for Africa project that was funded by the EU, that has really been on the forefront of better monitoring nitrogen emissions in Africa. So, what this project hopes to do is, as I mentioned, aggregate data that at least gives the most up-to-date picture of, say, the nitrogen profile of a country like Benin. And then from that, be able to say, okay, here are some pretty glaring gaps that need to be addressed. And what are some of the low-hanging fruit that we can address in terms of better collecting data and helping a country like Benin develop a national action plan? So that's kind of how we're approaching this. This project is very much, again, kind of coordinating and connecting networks and trying to figure out what are the key priorities for the nitrogen research agenda, as opposed to engaging in primary research of data collection and analysis. And so that's where we're going to be kind of navigating this road, for this project. But thank you very much for the question.
Thanks. Moving on to the next question from Sonia Singh. This question is for Shin regarding the Nitrogen and Climate Working Group. Is there a plan to generate a new data set here, or just working on the data sets that are available from different countries?
Yes, thank you for the great question. So I have to say that we will start with having an overview of the existing landscape of the research for nitrogen and climate interactions. First, identify some of those information gap, modeling gap, or data gap. And then collectively as a working group, we can decide and prioritize with kind of following years of work together, whether we come out to do some to collect some new data, or we kind of identify some funding or program opportunities to kind of specifically target at addressing those data gaps. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Shin. I'm just going to keep moving since we're short on time. The next question from Ankil Kwast is, what is the approach to getting primary data for nitrogen use, such as bringing in farmers? David?
Well, also, Margot and Peter, please add to this. Again, the focus of this, in a project like this, which when you first look at it can seem quite grand, we felt it was quite important to put constraints on what we're trying to do here, right? And so the emphasis really is on, as Peter and Margot spoke about, collecting national and regional level data that already exists, and aggregating it in one place and visualizing it in one place. And so there are already great efforts focusing directly on farmers, including several of our partner networks that are part of this. And we obviously want to have farmer organizations as partners in the working groups and in other parts of this project. But in terms of directly engaging with farmers and collect, and at the farm level data collection, that is not the primary focus of the project.
Thanks, David. Next question is from Chen Gong for Xin again regarding the nitrogen climate working group. He asks, besides the nitrogen in agricultural systems and green ammonia, will this project also focus on nitrogen sources from fossil fuel combustion?
The short answer is yes. So I hope my presentation wasn't misleading that in the sense that we're only focused on cropland, but we're as a working group. So what I presented was just kind of trying to show an example of how the climate actions interact with nitrogen management. But as you point out, there are many other different sectors have important intersections between the climate action and nitrogen management. And those are the ones that we want to have your expertise to contribute to and help us to have a more holistic understanding of the climate action and nitrogen management.
And I should say, we're also thinking about the kinds of actions at the nitrogen climate interface where nitrogen may be reduced indirectly. So the broader effort to try and phase out fossil fuels will indirectly lead to reductions in nitrogen pollution, right? Without an explicit focus on nitrogen per se. You're just trying to phase out fossil fuels for climate and air pollution purposes. Whereas the potential transition, large-scale transition to green ammonia does require explicit decisions to be made at the nexus of nitrogen and climate. And so really thinking about those kind of explicit trade-offs is also what we're especially interested in. But yes, the link with fossil fuels will definitely be there, as Xin mentioned.
Thanks. Okay, Mohammed Riaz asks if this network will also aim to develop any global documents like those from the iN-Net. I think that's also a question for David.
I mean, the documents, so the documents that are explicitly generated by iN-Net tend to be, for example, the declarations after the iN-Net conferences every 3 years. Those declarations will continue as iN-Net documents. And then there have been several projects and networks obviously linked to iN-Net. So the International Nitrogen Management System came out of iN-Net, but is producing INMS focused publications like the International Nitrogen Assessment, which will be a hugely useful resource published towards later this year. So yeah, I mean, there will be certain outputs, I'm sure, that have a global focus, whether they be papers or grant proposals or policy briefs. And we'll kind of see where that ends up, and that will in many ways be also determined by the makeup of the different working groups and the different components of this project.
Great. Okay, from Moni Osohu, how often should the data you need be sampled? Oh, that question disappeared before I had a chance to read it. Sorry about that. But I'm gonna just move on since we're short on time. But the next question is, can data on the distribution of the main types of fertilizer in the country be useful? Maybe that's for Peter.
I mean, I would think so. Yes, certainly. It is certainly going to be very important for making national action plans for particular countries. In some countries, there's going to be very detailed data on different types of fertilizer applied in different places at different times, and in other countries, there's not. And that is going to be a challenge. And we're going to have to ask these questions about, okay, do we want to spend a lot of time improving certain types of databases? And the discussion is going to have to be, yeah, if I really knew that fertilizer type and place was super important, had a big impact on changing the environmental impact of nitrogen, then we would prioritize that. And again, I think a big focus we're hoping to develop is the idea of that what data is going to be most useful to make action. And there's been a bunch of good work in the past to this where, for instance, in the nitrous oxide area, there was a bunch of work in the, wow, I'm really old, in the 70s and in the 80s showing certain types of fertilizer types like calcium nitrate led to very high nitrous oxide emissions from vegetable crops. That's a kind of, so that's a kind of piece of data that would have a big impact on the total emissions from a country. So I think we really need to have some discussions about just where do we need to augment our databases to get the most impact on. And again, we could if we have to keep the big picture in mind, is we want to reduce nitrogen waste by half, right? See, I always forget, it's not 30% by 2030, it's half by 50% by 2030.
Great, thank you, Peter. It looks like actually our last couple of questions were answered in the chat. I want to say I apologize. There are a lot of questions that I wasn't able to monitor in the chat box, not the Q&A section, but unfortunately we weren't able to get to all of that. But I do want to thank everyone for their questions. It looks like we're finishing a couple of minutes early. If there's any last questions that anyone wants to put into the Q&A box, we do have a couple minutes left. In the meantime, I'm going to drop all of those links into the chat one more time so that you can access our working group application, our website, mailing list, and also the data portal feedback form. So we can leave it open for a couple more minutes if there's last questions, but just want to thank everyone one last time for your attendance, your participation. It was a really active Q&A and chat, and it was great getting to be introduced to so many people who are interested, and the enthusiasm is really inspiring. So thanks so much.
Yes, thank you so much. And perhaps as well, Carson is putting chats in the links in the chat, just to say this webinar has been recorded. So we'll be sending around the recording because I know several folks weren't able to make it or couldn't stay the whole time. We'll be sending it out to the list of folks that registered for this webinar. It'll also be posted on our website, and several of us will be posting it on our various feeds. There was a question about the ambition of halving nitrogen waste, and I should say, and I know you might want to jump in as well, but we agree that it's an ambitious goal, and on the one hand, that kind of ambition is necessary to return to various planetary boundaries and various thresholds, and on the other hand, that goal was not made by us. That's a goal that's been agreed by various policy forums, and it is not the role of the scientific community to, necessarily say whether it was wise to engage in those targets or not. I mean, some of us maybe, but it's more about, okay, how can we mobilize the resources across the scientific community and connections with other stakeholders to try and at least increase the likelihood of meeting those goals. Edna, I don't know if you wanted to jump in on that.
I just think, yeah, the idea of it's about having nitrogen waste to the environment, right, through nutrient management. And so the main idea behind the policy goal, as I understand it, is to focus on these ideas of food security and local water quality, environmental quality, and air pollution as a whole. So while it may be ambitious, it also spans a wide range of environmental concerns. So we would hope that it provides the basis for ambitious actions on those targets.
Thank you. All right, we'll give you back 4 minutes of your time. We really appreciate all of you joining and being so engaged, and it makes us even more excited to kick off this project. So thank you very much. Please be in touch, and we hope to see many of you soon. Thank you.